People, I'm hoping you can all hear me. If I'm not coming across to anybody, could you let me know in a Facebook notification, and I'll see what I can do at this end. But as far as I can tell, I'm live and ready to go. If anybody's got any questions, they can dump them on me on Facebook as well, and I should be able to pick them up from here on my notifications. So to start off with, I'm Willie. I'm Scottish. I'm originally from Kilburnie, way back. I'm in my 60s and I'm now living in Newfoundland on the east coast of Canada. Grew up in Kilburnie in Milton Quadrant. Mum and Dad are still there, and did most of my early reading in the old library in the Institute, Knox's Institute on the main street, on the corner of the Cross. Spent a lot of time in there as a kid, and that was the place where I first read things like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and all the books that got me into the fantasy and horror genres in the first place. Went to Bridgend Primary School, went to Ladyland Primary School, and then was in Dalry High for a couple of years before they opened the academy. And I was in third year, the first year of Garnock Academy. So I spent my schooling and up till about 1975 in Kilburnie. Didn't do much writing back then. Did some writing for English classes and had some poems in the school yearbooks type things. Wrote a couple of short stories, but back then I really wanted to be a scientist. When I went to university, I was doing botany and zoology. And after university, I fell into a career in IT and ended up in London working for big banks. Didn't do any writing at all during that time, really. It was only when I hit 30, just after I hit 30, moved back to Scotland. One day I had an idea about a story, and it was about a wee old man who was sitting in a graveyard and he was watching a ghost of a young woman. Don't know what interested me about the idea, but I thought I'll write this down and see what happens to it. And at the same time, I saw an advert for a ghost story magazine, a competition in a magazine for ghost stories. So I wrote the story and I sent it away to this magazine, and much to my surprise, I got second place in the whole of Britain for the story and won £100. And I thought, oh, this writing lark's fairly easy, so I'll do a bit more of that. Little did I know it wasn't as easy as all that, but it got me going. I spent most of the 90s writing short stories back in the British small press, and it wasn't until about 2000 and from then on I started getting a bit more success, appearing in bigger magazines. And by the time it came round to about 2006, 2007, I was making a bit of money out of it. At the same time, I lost my job in Edinburgh. The job disappeared, so we decided to bite the bullet, take the plunge, sell the house in Scotland and move. And where we ended up moving to was Newfoundland. So I ended up here. I've been here for 13 years now, and I've been writing solidly for all that time. If anybody wants to know anything more about me, just drop me a line. But I was going to talk a bit about some of the things I do actually write about, and some of my past history. As I said, I spent a lot of time in Kilburnie Library, and I got into ghost stories very early on. I remember when I was about 12, I got a class prize at Ladyland from last year at primary school, and Mrs. Lang, who was my teacher at the time, said to me, "What do you want for a prize?" And I said, "Oh, I want a book of ghost stories." And she didn't argue with me. She bought me a book of ghost stories, and I've still got that on the shelf, and I still remember all the stories from that book. And they got me into writing and reading ghost stories. I'm seeing people signing on now, so that's nice. People saying hello. So hello back to all of you, and hello to my mum and dad, who I think are listening to this, and any other members of my family. I think at least one of my wee sisters is probably here as well. Back to the library. As I say, I spent a lot of time in the Institute library in Kilburnie when I was a lad. My mum was going in there a lot, and I went in with her, and I was reading an awful lot of stuff from there. And hello again to John Smith as well. John's for Dalry and went to school with me at Dalry High, and he's now logged on here as well. So the old friends and family are coming along. Back in Knoxville's Institute Library, the librarian always told me off because she thought I was reading too quickly. I read an awful lot of books very, very quickly back when I was in about 11, 12, 13 years old, round about then. I was ploughing my way through every science fiction and fantasy book I could get my hands on. And even after the library moved down to the public park, I was still making my way down there and taking out books by the dozen from them until I got to university, and then I was buying books in second-hand bookshops in Glasgow and then selling them back to other second-hand bookshops in Glasgow for about the same price. So there are a lot of books going through my hands. Back then I was reading things like, I went through a Alistair MacLean phase, so I read everything by Alistair MacLean. I went through a Tolkien phase, and I read all the Tolkien stuff that was available at the time. I got hooked on Michael Moorcock for a while, and his big fantasy series, and read them there's a couple of dozen of them that I got through back then. I read a lot of Dennis Wheatley stuff, which is how I got into horror in the first place. And then when I was about 15, 16, Stephen King started coming along, and I've been a Stephen King fan since way back then, since 75, 76-ish. I remember we had an old battered copy of The Shining in the house, which I read 5 or 6 times back then. So all of that mixed together in my head, and coupled with the TV watching and film watching I was doing at the time, I was going to Kilburney Picture House for Saturday matinees a lot, watching monster movies, watching Tarzan movies, and watching action movies and westerns, and it all sort of mixed into my head. And alongside that, there was TV watching like the Avengers and Thunderbirds and Lost in Space at the time, I remember well. And then Doctor Who from a very early age. I think I watched the first ever episode of Doctor Who back in '63 when I was 5, and I was hooked on it for a while, especially through the John Pertwee years. Pertwee was my hero at the time. He was my doctor at the time. So that all mixed together in my head, and so I've got a background in the science fiction and fantasy stuff, and the horror stuff came mainly from my reading, mainly from Stephen King, and from my liking of the Hammer horror movies, which I also watched. They used to be on the BBC on a Friday and Saturday night late on. I remember sitting watching Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing beating the hell out of each other when I was a kid, and I loved that at the time. And a lot of this stuff now comes out in what I write and the way I write, and anybody that's read my books will probably see that as well. Has anybody actually got any questions? Because I'm seeing people logging on, but nobody's actually asked me anything yet. So it'd be nice to have a question. If not, I said earlier I went to university in Glasgow, and one of the things I write about a lot is a Glasgow private eye called Derek Adams, and he's basically what I would be if I was in Glasgow and working as a private eye. He likes to drink a lot, he likes to smoke a lot, which I don't do anymore, but I used to. And he wanders the streets of Glasgow looking for monsters to fight. Oh, he doesn't actually look for them, they just come to him. So there's some monster fighting going on, there's some demons appear every now and again, there's ghosts appear every so often, and Derek solves, or tries to solve, all these cases. I started writing him back when I first started writing, that would be in 92. One of the first things I wrote was a short story version of the Johnson Amulet, which was Derek's first case. That's since been expanded into a book, a full novel. There's 3 novels and a whole load of Derek Adams short stories out there now, and he still comes along, and I still write about him more than, I shall be nearly 30 years on next year. He's proved very popular over the years, nearly made it into film as well. I had a couple of film producers been in touch with me over the years to try and get Derek going into film, but it's never actually happened yet. I like him as a character because he lets the Glaswegian in me out, and he lets me wander around the bars in Glasgow and lets me relive my old times at university. He stomps around the same sort of areas that I used to stomp around when I was living there. I lived in Glasgow for 5 years all in all. Firstly at university, then I spent a year in the Hunterian Museum. Excuse me, I was working on the plant fossil collection there. And my time spent in the museum also comes out in my writing, because I got to work my way through the stacks and look at all the exhibits and I got an awful lot of ideas from things I could see in history and archaeology and paleontology and a whole lot. And again, a lot of that comes out in my writing over the coming years as well. Still more people saying hello to me here. No questions as of yet. But, I'll just go away and check the questions, see if anybody's asked me anything. But no questions as of yet. So I'll just keep gabbing on for a while until somebody actually says something. As I said, Derek's a big part of my writing career. Nowadays, I self-publish some Derek stuff on Amazon. But back then, back in 1999, when I first sold the first novel, it was sold to a small publishing house in America. And at the same time, I sold a Scottish horror story, Island Life. And that Island Life was going to be my first novel. Sold it to a publisher in Florida. They promised me fame and fortune, and I thought I was on my way. They published about 5,000 paperback copies of that novel, and then they went bust and didn't pay me a penny for any of it. So I wasn't really on my way at all. But just having that book there actually got me some recognition in some of the big American magazines and helped me get my name out. And over the course of the early part of the 2000s, I started placing more and more short stories in better magazines and selling my novels to a lot of small press magazines. I wrote quite a lot of Scottish stuff back then. There's a vampire novel, what's it called again? Eldrin, the Book of the Dark. And that was my first real long length thing, and that's actually set in a small west coast town, which is a steelwork that's been shut, a golf course on a hill which goes up over the hill towards the seaside, and anybody that reads it will recognise Kilbirnie fairly closely. And a lot of it's set in a bar in Kilbirnie which was modelled on where I did a lot of my early drinking, in the Milton Hotel. So anybody that used to go to the Milton Hotel will probably recognise that and some of the events that went on in there in the book as well. Another early one was, another Scottish one, was a trilogy called The Watchers, where I set up a theory that Bonnie Prince Charlie was a vampire, and all the Highland Army were vampires, and they're coming south on Hadrian's Wall to try and take the throne. And Hadrian's Wall's protected by a group of people whose job is to stop the vampires coming south. So it actually was written before Game of Thrones, but as it features a wall and an army coming south and sort of political shenanigans in the south of the wall, a lot of people have accused me of ripping off Game of Thrones, but actually I wrote it mine first, so I was happy about that. Didn't make as much money as George R.R. Martin, unfortunately, but the book's still in print, and if anybody's interested in that one, you can get it on Amazon. I've written other Scottish stuff over the years as well. Probably my favourite is one that was based on my time in Edinburgh. So I spent some time in the early 2000s working for a software house in Edinburgh, and was commuting into Edinburgh every day and seeing the castle every day and walking the streets of Princess Street and Rose Street and Queen Street most of the time. And just doing that gave me an idea for a book, and The Exiled came out of all of that. It's a serial killer story set in Edinburgh, but it's got a fantasy and horror twist to it, and I won't ruin any of it by explaining the plot. But if anybody's interested in an Edinburgh cop story which has got some supernatural in it, that's another one to look out for. Once I moved to Newfoundland, I started writing a bit more about Newfoundland topics as well. Back in 2007-ish, I started getting contracts for books with bigger publishers in the States. There's a publisher called Dark Regions Press, who were one of the biggest genre publishers for horror stuff. And I luckily got into them and started selling hardcovers to them. And I've got some nice hardcover copies of my books on my shelf, which they've published. Around about the same time, about 2008, the ebooks phenomenon started taking off. And I was lucky enough to get a big hit in the first couple of years there with a science fiction book this time called The Invasion, a little alien invasion B-movie story. And for some reason that took off on Amazon very, very quickly and sold tens of thousands of copies and got me up into the top the top reaches of the horror and sci-fi lists on Amazon, and got me noticed very much so that year. So that The Invasion sold really well, and on the back of that, The Valley, another one of mine, and Island Life, the Scottish horror one I was telling you about earlier, also sold very well. So all of them took off on Amazon over 2009. And I ended 2009 having made an awful lot of money, sold an awful lot of ebooks, and having a lot of people know about me. And that's allowed me since then to be a full-time writer in the period the last 10 years. I've actually been full-time for 12 years now. The first couple were a bit ropey money-wise, but I've been making up for that, and I've managed to stay full-time. Hopefully that will continue. And it's nice not starving. I'm still trying to check if there's any questions for me, but nobody's said anything. I'll go back. I'm checking Facebook now, if it will let me. My machine's running a bit slow now. I think it's only the people reacting to the video, and nobody's actually asked me any questions yet, as far as I can tell. Nope, just scrolling down. No questions yet. As I say, I can see that I'm live online. I'm presuming I'm getting through to you all. I'll just sit here and gabber away for a while. I'm sitting in my kitchen in Newfoundland. John's just in charge. John Smith's just been in touch to say there are questions coming up, but I don't know where to go and look for them. So give me a second. I'll go and see if I can look for them. I'll open up another page and see if I can find anything. I'll just sit here and gabber away for a while. Alright, I'm sitting in my kitchen in Newfoundland. I've now got 2 videos running, so I've done something silly. Give me a second, I'll see what I can do. I've stopped that one. And now got a feed where I can see you all, the questions, as far as I can tell. I'm on the live chat link, and I'm now seeing some questions, so I can answer some of them. Some people are... Alright, first Russian question from Diane Smith Gallagher, and she asked, what area in archaeology do I prefer? Back when I was a student, I was working in botany. I was actually studying pollen analysis, and I was analysing peat bogs in Scotland and studying the history of the peat bogs through the stratigraphy of the pollen. And we were working on Scottish archaeology from around about the Neolithic times and the possibility of agriculture in Scotland 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. And that got me interested in looking at things like Maze Howe and Skara Brae and all the Neolithic stone circles in Scotland. And that led me into studying Neolithic culture in general. And I got interested enough to go to places like Stonehenge and Avebury and the big burial mounds down in England. I went to Malta to look at the Neolithic culture stuff there, and I went to Crete to look at the stuff in Knossos, and Carnac in France to look at all the big stone circles and menhirs there. So I'd say my main interest was back in about 2000, 3000 BC, which is stuff that's always interested me, and I've always been interested in why they built the stone circles in the first place. So, and a lot of that has come out in my books over the years as well. There's quite a few adventures amongst standing stones and in stone circles and in burial mounds and chambered tombs turn up in my books. It's something that appeals to me. My favourite personal ghost story also comes from a chambered tomb. I was in Orkney, when year was this? 1979, and I was standing at the mouth inside one of the chambered tombs, taking a photo out along the chamber to where the view outside. And while I was doing that, somebody tapped me in the shoulder and said, "Excuse me." And at that point, I knew for a fact there was nobody else in the tomb because I'd just come out of it and it was empty. Uh, I didn't even want to look round, but I looked round, but of course there was nobody there. But I can still hear that wee voice saying, "Excuse me," in my ear. I have no idea where that one came from. That's one of my favourite supernatural stories of things that have happened to me. The Chamber Tombs first started coming out in my books in Island Life, the Scottish one. It's about a tomb on one of the Outer Hebridean Islands where the archaeologists dig it up and things start coming out of it. Again, digging things up and having bad things come out of them is another thing that turns up quite a few things in my books. Somebody just after Diana mentioned Carnacki. Carnacki's a character I've been writing for a while, and thinking about the Chamber Tombs, one of my favourite Carnacki stories is Carnacki's an Edwardian ghost hunter about the 1910s onwards. And one of my favourite stories of his, he goes into a burial mound in Salisbury Plain and something nasty starts coming out to affect him. So you can see the burial mound stuff has come out several times. To all these people who are saying they could listen to my voice forever, thank you very much. It's a fairly typical accent for this part of Scotland where I'm from. Anybody, all the Kilburnie people and Dalry and Beef people that are listening will recognise my accent pretty well. It hasn't changed much over the years, even though I've been here for 13 years now, and it's been 45 years since I left Kilburnie. I left Kilburnie in 77, so 43 years since I left Kilburnie. But so my accent hasn't changed all that much. If anybody's got any questions, the place to drop them is the William Meikle live chat page, and I'll see them there. Looks like that's where they are. John Mason just asked me if there's any chance of a Carnacki S-Squad crossover. I've included some of the Carnacki stuff as historical background in the S-Squad books, but I can't actually see a way to have Carnacki come forward in time or the S-Squad to go back in time to get that done. I'm not sure that Sever Press would go for a time travel story, but I'll see. Mentioned the S-Squad. The S-Squad's my current series that I'm writing. I started them about 4 years ago and I've written 10 books already for them. They're a set of wee sweary Scotsmen, Squaddies, who get tasked with fighting monsters around the world. The idea came mainly from things like dog soldiers and aliens and possibly predators, stuff like that. Military people fighting monsters. Dog soldiers in particular was a big influence. The chat and banter between the soldiers is an influence in the way my Squaddies interact with each other. The ones in Dog Soldiers weren't all Scottish, but the Squaddies in my books are mostly Scottish. John just asked me if there could be a time slip. As I said earlier, I can see how I could do it, but I'm not sure that Sever Press would go for a time travel story like that. They're like fairly straightforward, modern soldiers fighting Squaddies mysteries, and to get anything more in, I have to persuade them a bit. There might be a chance. I've got another series I've just started, The Land Below, which is a lost world under a cave system in Austria, and that's set probably coexistent with Carnacki around about the same time, just before. So I might be able to get Carnacki into that one rather than the S-Squad, but I'll see how that goes. Katie Jane just asked me if I've been following the Oak Island mystery, and I used to. I read quite a lot about it in the past, but so I've lost interest in it over the years because there's been a lot of digging and nobody's actually really found anything, and I can't see them finding much now, given the amount of excavation that's gone on over there. If anything was there to be found, I think they'd be found it by now. You never can tell though. There might be the hidden Templar of the treasures, or might be the Templars might be there somewhere rather than just in the National Treasure films. It would surprise me though. Right, I'll just go back a bit. I'll retreat a bit. Hello to Alison McAllister, who's from Milton Road in Kilburnie, just round the corner. Mum and Dad are still in Milton Corridors at number 7, so if you see them, you can say hello. I'll go backtrack a bit. Back to I was talking about 2009ish about the ebooks. Since then, I've had an awful lot of ebooks published, and they're the things that keep the money coming in more than paper, more even than the paperbacks and hardcovers or the short stories. The ebooks are the things where the bulk of my money comes from. So I've been very very thankful that the technology actually came along to let us do that. And I'm still producing ebooks, and the S Squad stuff are now my main money maker, and they keep me busy for a long time. As I say, I'm 62 now, getting on a bit. Sometimes worry that I'm writing myself out, and I'll hit a stage where I don't want to do it anymore. But see, next year it'll be 30 years since I started. I don't seem to be slowing down all that much. Especially now the S Squad have taken off and they've given me an incentive to keep going. I had a bad patch about 4 years ago where a couple of my publishers went bust at the same time, and people I had been doing really well with and making quite a bit of so no longer existed, and I nearly retired back then, so I'd be sort of 2016, 17, and my wife fell ill round about then as well, so I thought I'd stop and look after her, but about 3 months after she fell ill, the writing bug came back to me, and that was when S Squad started. And since then, it's sort of geared up again. I've been writing more and more as I go along, so I can see me still doing this for a while yet, as long as my age doesn't catch up too far with me and my brain doesn't deteriorate. As John Smith just reminded me, I'm closer to 63 than 62, so thanks for that, John. Still not as old as you, though. John Mason just asked what's next for the S Squad. I'm currently writing number 11, where they're in the Yukon and they're facing up to a pack of things which might be wolves, but might be something different from wolves, a bit bigger maybe. And that's all I'm saying at the moment about that. But it's another cold climate one for them. And this one's being told by Wiggo, who's had a promotion. He's now Sergeant Wiggo. And I thought it was time he had a story to tell of his own. So he's taken over this one and he's telling it for himself. After that, I've got half a dozen ideas. It always depends with the S Squad stories which one Severed Press go for next. As soon as I finish one, I send them a couple of ideas for another one, and they choose which of those ideas they want to go for. So I've got a list of ideas that I'd like to write. And I've also got a big list of a couple of dozen ideas which they've turned down over the years, which might get written eventually and might not. So there's numerous things in there. There's of things which the Sever Press didn't go for, which I'd be interested in writing. Things like giant octopus stories, which they didn't seem interested in, or I did have a time travel story in there which they didn't go for, and an alien invasion story set around about Roswell, which I wanted to do, but they wouldn't go for either. So all of these things might come back at some point in the future. Having talked about the S Squad, let's go back again a bit further back, because before S Squad I wrote a lot of Newfoundland stories, and I was mentioning them. We live here on a house on the coast, right on the shore. We've got a view out over a bay, and in winter it gets really cold, ices up, and we get big huge storms rolling through. Back in about 2008, I had an idea for a horror story set during one of these storms, and I wrote a book called The Dunfield Terror. So if anybody wants to know what it's like here in winter, I've been told I capture it pretty damn well in that book. So you can get the book The Dunfield Terror, you'll find out from there how we live here in winter months. As I said, it gets cold. It's not like Kilburnie where you get a couple of inches of snow and then it melts. Here we get snow around about Christmas time usually, and it stays on the ground until April, with more snow gathering on it every day just about. Some years we've got 5-6 feet of snow lying in the back garden, deep in the back garden, and I've had to dig myself out of 3-4 feet in front of the door several times, and the car's been buried completely a couple of times and I have to dig out round about it. So it's as I say, it's not like Kilburnie snow. This is real snow. Diane Smith Gallagher again says my work seems perfect for the Necronomicon convention in Providence. It's something I've thought about. I've thought about going down to America. I don't really want to travel during the COVID thing now, though, and I can't see us going for a while. Because Sue is not allowed to fly, and I'm not leaving her here on her own. So I can't see any conventions, especially in America, happening anytime soon. There's new people joining all the time. I've noticed another old school pal, Davy Johnson's just joined. So hello, Davy. And one of my nieces, Nicola, has just joined as well. So hello, Nicola. And another relative, Anne Louise Naylor's just joined. So hello, hello to all of you. It's nice to see everybody joining in. More work I've written and set here in Newfoundland. There's a couple of I've got a themed set of stories called Sigils and Totems series. You'll find them on my website as well. And the idea of that is that there are houses spread around the world, lots of different houses, where people can go and see, if not talk to, the dead. Again, this might be a time slip, it might be the dead, nobody really ever knows, but people use these houses to sort of ease themselves after a bereavement. And this series has taken over a lot of my writing in recent years. It started with a novella called Broken Sigil. It's moved to Newfoundland in recent years as well. There's two novels set in Newfoundland in there. There's Songs of Dreaming Gods and The Boathouse. The Boathouse in particular is again set here in this town, and mainly during a big autumn storm. So where the Dunfield Terror tells you what it's like in winter here, the Boathouse tells you what it's like when hurricane season arrives. We actually get the back end of some of the tropical hurricanes here. We had one come through 2008, which flooded us round about the house here. There was 3 feet of water round about the house, and the roads in and out of town were washed away. We were without power for a week, and that was a bit of an experience. It's not something we're used to coming from Scotland. We've been hit by another hurricane since then, didn't do as much damage, but there's always a chance of the back end of a big one coming up and hitting us at some point, and that's, again, it's a bit of a surprise. It wasn't something we were prepared for when we got here, but the house seems to stand up to it. The houses here are all old timber houses, like the ones up the top end of Stockbridge Crescent in Kilburnie. It reminds me of being in my granny's house as a kid. They stand up pretty well to the weather, though. We've not had much trouble with them at all, touch wood. Although there's quite a bit of work needs doing round about the house every spring after the winter storms. Summers aren't too bad. We get it's actually warmer than Scotland here in the summer, and drier as well. We don't get as much rain as Scotland does, apart from maybe a couple of weeks in the spring and a week in the autumn. We tend to go straight from summer into nearly winter, and straight from winter into nearly summer without much spring or much autumn in between. Autumn's usually just about a week. All the leaves fell off the trees within a week here this year. We had 2 cold days, and after that the leaves just went all yellow and fell off. And then we had snow just after that. So we went from like 70-degree temperatures to snow within 2 weeks. And in spring it does the same thing. It can go from -10 to +20 within a couple of days. So the seasons are a bit truncated here, although winter lasts for 5 months and summer lasts for 4, and so spring and autumn are a bit short in between. Let's go back and see if there's any other questions come in. Nicola says I'm looking well, so thanks for that, Nicola. John Mason's asked about an S-Squad in Australia, and again, Sever Press are actually an Australian publishing house, so I thought they would have gone for one. And I pitched them one about a Yowie, which is the Australian version of the Abominable Snowman, and the S-Squad fighting them, but they wouldn't go for it. I'm thinking about pitching them a giant crocodile story to them next time, so we'll see if they go for that one. Katie Jane asks if I have a favourite book or the one I'm the proudest of, and that changes every so often. The favourite used to be the first Eric Adams one, the Johnson Amulet, because it was the first one I finished, and I was really happy with how it all went and what I did with it. Later on, the favourite became the exiled one, the Scottish serial killer one that I was telling you about. And I still like that because I think I nailed what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it, and it feels Scottish and it feels like me, that one. More recently, though, I think there's another Scottish one set in Skye, a ghost story set on Skye called Tormentor. It's a long novella, short novel thing. It's only about 40,000 words. But in that one, I think I said exactly what I wanted to say, and I actually scared myself writing it, and I've heard I've scared a lot of people reading it. So I think that might be my favourite because it's doing what it's supposed to do as a ghost story, and it's making people look over their shoulder in the dark and think about things. So I'll go for Tormentor as my favourite for today. But ask me again tomorrow, and you may get a different answer for that one. Tormentor was written for Dark Fuse, an American publisher, and they published quite a few things that I thought I hit the spot really well with. I was on a hot streak back in about 2007, 8, 9. No, a bit later than that. Later than that, sorry. 2013, 14, 15. I hit a hot streak with them. I wrote Broken Sigil, Tormentor, The Hole, which was a big hit for me on Amazon, Songs of Dreaming Gods, The Exiled, and Fungoid, which is a killer mushroom story. I wrote all of them for Dark Fuse, and they all sold really well. And I thought that sort of collaboration with Dark Fuse was building into something that I thought was going to take me to bigger places. But since Dark Fuse died, that side of writing has sort of faded away a bit, and I'm doing more of the S Squad stories are taking over now. But I'd like to get back to writing more of the sort of weird fiction rather than monster fiction at some point. We'll see how it goes. Nick McGregor asks if I have to given that I have to pitch my stories to publishers, if I'm a big outliner as part of the process. The only ones I'm pitching really are the S Squad stories, and I don't actually pitch an outline as such to that. I just pitch a general idea, like a couple of sentences, and they go for it from there. I do have a general outline for most of my novels. I don't outline short stories, but I outline novels. But I never actually stick to it. I'm usually about 10 pages in and I go off script. And I call them my oh God, I've killed Kenny moments, because I was from South Park, when either a character dies suddenly or somebody goes wildly away from where I was planning them to go. And that seems to happen almost every time I write. But I trust my hindbrain, if you like, the thing that does the actual writing, to take me to the right place in the end. So I'll just let them go. I don't try and force things back into the outline once they've gone off it. I just try and rewrite the outline as I go along. As I said, short stories I don't outline. They just come as they come, and I take them as they come. I've written over 300 short stories now, and I've had them published with some big publishers and big names, and not just in Britain, but across the world. I've been published in 14 different countries now, I think. And especially in Japan, I've had a dozen professional stories published in big magazines in Japan. I can safely say I'm actually big in Japan. And more recently, I've started selling to Germany. The S Squad books I've sold to Germany and are selling really well. The first couple of them are out there now. So I'm beginning to make my name around the world at the age of 63. And can't really call myself an overnight sensation, but it's probably getting close to it. I'm excited to see how the German S Squad series goes, actually, because they've only just started publishing them, and looking at the rankings of the books on Amazon over there, it looks like I've got some fairly big checks coming from them in the next couple of years, which will be nice. I don't really have to worry too much about checks coming in now, because I'm old enough now to be a pensioner, and I'm getting a pension from the IT work I did beforehand. So that's keeping us going, and I can coast a bit more on the writing front. And I'm hoping that'll lead to me being able to write more of the weird fiction side. It doesn't sell quite as well as the monster books, but we'll see how it goes. Because I like writing the monster books anyway. The monster books are great fun. And just quick check to make sure I'm still going out live. Yeah, I'm still here. and still yattering away, and people are still hearing me, and I'm still getting questions. So we'll keep going. I don't know what Kaylee's saying boo to me for, but that may be about my favourite book and about the ghost story. I've written a lot of ghost stories over the years. The Karnaki stuff I was telling you about earlier is an Edwardian ghost stories, and I've got 3 collections out of them currently, with another one coming. Karnaki's based in London, but he travels all over Britain to solve ghost story hunting cases. And I've got a lot of his cases are set in Glasgow and Edinburgh now as well, or in various parts of the Scottish Highlands. I've got another big ghost story set in the Scottish Highlands called The House on the Moor, which is a novella, which was again great fun to write. And I've written an awful lot of short stories, in particular a book called The Ghost Club. A couple of years back, I thought the Ghost Club was going to be a big thing for me, a big breakout, and it would get a lot of recognition for me. It didn't quite take off the way I wanted it to, but I enjoyed it tremendously anyway, and I got some big names to write blurbs for it, writers that I admire. The premise for that was that there was a club in London hosted by Arthur Conan Doyle, Henry James and Bram Stoker, and they invited other writers along to tell stories for the price of their dinner. So I got to write stories in the style of people like Robert Louis Stevenson, Jules Verne, Stoker himself, Doyle himself, James himself, H.G. Wells, and other people who were around at the time. Tolstoy, Chekhov, and H. Rider Haggard come to mind. So I wrote all those stories and had them published by a South African publishing house called Ghost Story Press. And not Ghost Story Press, Crystal Lake Publishing. Sorry, my brain's away somewhere else. Trying to read and write at the same time. Crystal Lake Publishing published the Ghost Club, and got some really good reviews. Sold well for a couple of months, and then it disappeared. I was kind of hoping that would be the culmination of my weird fiction career, and would get me mentioned for a couple of awards, but it never happened. And it's hit me in the confidence for a wee while around about the same time. There's another reason I was thinking about giving up back 4 years ago. John Smith asked me what was the final straw that convinced me to follow the dream and write. And I think that was losing the job in Edinburgh. I had been writing part-time. I was doing a lot of writing on my commute on a Palm Pilot, so I put hunting and pecking out stories on the train. But when the job in Edinburgh disappeared, and we thought about what would happen next, and I was having some money coming in, that was the impetus that I went, right, I'll go. The thing that made me think that I could go and could do it was a story in a Scottish publication back then called Nova Scotia, which was a Scottish science fiction anthology with lots of big names in it. Famous Scottish science fiction writers like Charlie Stross and Ken MacLeod were in that one, and I got in there with them, and I got to go to Blackwell's and stand in a line while we were all signing the books for the book launch. So I was standing there next to Ken MacLeod and Charlie Stross signing books, and that made me think, yeah, maybe I could do this. Maybe I could, and that gave me the confidence to actually take the leap and try more than anything else. Excuse me while I have some beer. The beer over here is a bit fizzy for my liking, but it's palatable, I suppose. It's not like Scottish beer, though. I would murder somebody for a good pint of Cali 80 round about now. Going back to the ghost stories, there's a new Karnaki one coming out soon. And if anybody's interested, my website's williammeikle.com, and all these books I'm talking about are all on there. So if anybody fancies going along, you'll find links to buy them and from Amazon, and more information about the books themselves on there as well, and some links through to other interviews with me, and more general bump about what I do is on there. Diane Smith Gallagher asked me if there would be a sequel to The House on the Moor. And again, that's something I've thought about over the years, but I think I finished the story pretty comprehensively the last time. I'm not sure there's enough material there for a sequel. I do like to weave older stories into newer stories as I go along. People that read my stuff will notice that. a lot of the Carnacki stories, as I say, have been woven into more modern stuff over the years. Because Derek Adams has come across Carnacki influences now, and the S Squad have had Carnacki influences now, and some of the Signals and Totem stuff has had Carnacki influences now. They keep finding old books and old journals with older stories in them, and I like that idea of older stories from the past coming into the future and having an influence. I think it comes, again, anybody from Scotland and the Ayrshire area knows that people like telling stories, especially sitting with a drink with somebody. You'll hear an awful lot of stories from people. And those kind of stories sort of worm their way into your brain, and with me, they come out in my writing. My old granny used to tell stories all the time, and I think a lot of my storytelling stuff came through her and through the reading I did in the library that Mom took me to. So I've got them to thank for most of it, I think. And my wee sister's just joined, so hello Maggie. She's late. So where was I in the historical timeline? I was back, end of Dark Fuse. Yeah, Dark Fuse ended in 2017-ish. And again, the other one, the ghost stories were getting published by Dark Regions Press. They were publishing my ghost stories by Carnacki. I've also written quite a lot of ghost stories and weird fiction stories for Sherlock Holmes. We're allowed to write Sherlock Holmes stories now because he's gone public domain, so it means anybody can write them. And I've written 15, 16 short stories and a couple of novellas and a novel for Sherlock Holmes. And the publisher for them was, again, doing well for me. I was making quite a bit of money out of them, and they were giving me quite a high profile. But then that publisher died about the same time as Dark Fuse. And I've more or less given up writing the Sherlock Holmes stuff since then, but the Carnacki stuff keeps going. Carnacki's about the only one of the ghost story things that has come with me into this new era. The last of the old era, the last story of the old era back in 2017 was another Newfoundland horror story called The Green and the Black. And that came out of archaeology again. It's got a team of urban archaeologists going into the centre of Newfoundland to study an old Irish mining settlement from Victorian times. And again, they find something that the Irish dug up in the mine, which should have stayed down there. That's a novel, and it's got a lot of my botany experience in it, because it's the bad thing in it is a spore which grows, and it's like a tree that grows inside people's bodies and becomes sentient. So again, that's a botanical idea that's come forward with me from university times into the future. But since then, as I said earlier, the S Squad has sort of taken over. I've written 10 books with these Scottish squaddies now, and I'm getting to know the characters, and some of them die, some of them move on and retire, others come and go. The core of the squad is staying mostly the same, and they're all growing with me as I write about them and we go into the future, and we'll see what happens with them in years to come. I mentioned earlier I had another series started. The Land Below is going back to another favourite thing of mine, which is Lost World stories. I've loved Lost World stuff since way back in the Professor Challenger Dinosaurs Lost World thing, and also the old 1970s Doug McClure stories of him going to the lands that time forgot and stuff like that. And I've written a few Lost World stories over the years. But this new series is me taking it back to basics and going back to Victorian era, early Edwardian era, and taking a team of adventurers down into a big deep cave and getting them lost there with encountering monsters. And I've got plenty of ideas for where this series is going to go. I've written one of them, it's doing really well for me. And I've got a plot outlined for the second one and possibly even the third one. So once I finish this current S Squad book, that's what's happening next. And I've been talking for far too long now. I've been talking for 50 minutes now, and I need some more questions if anybody's got them, because I'm just about running out of things to say about myself. I'm not used to talking this much about me, actually. Let's have another think. Have another wee drink of beer before I think what I'm doing next. let's go back to the ghost stories a bit then. We'll talk about ghost stories a bit. If I can think of something new to say. Saying something new about ghost stories is a problem always, because most of the field's been well delved over the years now. I've read an awful lot of them back from Victorian times and all the way up into present day, and a lot of my friends write them. It's something I always want to be good at myself. I thought that might be where the main thrust of my career would take me over the years. That's what I wanted to do when I started. First thing I always wanted when I started was a book of supernatural stories of mine in hardback. I got that actually from Dark Regions Press. I got a book called Dark Melodies published from them in hardback back in 2010, 11ish. And that was a culmination of a dream for me. And as I said earlier, the Ghost Club was the one I thought might take me into the sort of the realms where I wanted to be with that kind of writing. But it never quite happened for me, and I'm not sure if it ever will now. And that's always going to be a regret for me, because it's the favourite things of mine to read. But so it goes. It's one of the perils of being a writer. You never really know what you're writing, which part of what you're writing people are going to pick up on, and sort of take as the best. If I ever ask any of my readers what they think the best of my writing is, I never get the answer that I expect. A lot of people latch onto things that I think might not be quite as good as other things, and vice versa. Things that I like a lot, readers might not like at all. Again, the Ghost Club was a case in point in that. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was the best thing I'd ever done, but the general opinion on most of it from most of the general readers was meh. So there you go. The S Squad taking off completely the way they have has surprised me greatly. I'm very pleased it has, and I love writing them. But it's a big surprise that the simpler tales of squaddies fighting monsters are the things that people latch on to most. Does anybody have any questions? Any more questions before we go along? There are, I can see there's 26, 27 of you watching. So if anybody's got a question, feel free to jump in now. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up in about 10 minutes' time. I was thinking an hour would be about the best length for this kind of thing. And so probably the best thing to do is wrap up in 10 minutes rather than waffle on and bore everybody to tears. If there's no questions, I can direct people to my website if you like. As I said earlier, it's williammeikle.com, and most of the stuff I've been talking about is back there. One thing I haven't mentioned so far, just went to have a look at my website. One thing I haven't mentioned so far is audiobooks, and it's part of writing I hadn't actually thought about much until recent years. But one of my publishers, Crossroads Press in the States, started publishing audiobooks of my books a few years back. And since then I've had, I think there's 21 of them now on the list, and a lot more to come still. I'm going to end up with having about 30 audiobooks on file by the end of this year, I think. And again, that's something that surprised me, how much people like them. There seems to be a big market for them. So if audiobooks are your thing, go and have a look at my website and you'll find a link through to audiobooks of my books, and a few of the things I've been talking about here come out in the audiobooks as well. Something I haven't talked about yet, I just realised, is H.P. Lovecraft. He's a divisive figure in his genre. He wrote back in the 1930s, and basically he's a well-known racist these days. And a very powerful writer, but some of his political views are beyond the pale these days, quite rightly. But his style has become a style that people write in called Lovecraftian fiction, and I've sold a lot of that over the years. It's basically weird fiction with cosmic horror and creatures who live outside humanity and don't really care about humanity at all. That's a conceit I quite like writing about, and quite a lot of my writing has got that in it. And I've written a lot of fiction not based on Lovecraftian stories, but based on that general idea now. And I've sold an awful lot of stories to anthologies and magazines based on that kind of general idea, and that's another thing that keeps me going. John Smith's just coming with a question: is what's my favourite tipple? I think he knows the answer to that one. These days it's single malt whiskey, and I've got a couple of favourites depending on how I feel. Highland Park's always a favourite. I've been a Highland Park fan since that trip to Orkney I was mentioning earlier back in '79, where I went to the distillery back then and they gave me a bottle. Similarly, I've been a Talisker fan since a trip to Skye back in about '99, and I also like Bunnahabhain, an Islay malt, and again that's mainly because I went to the distillery when I was on holiday out there one year. So my favourite malts are ones that of distilleries I've visited on holidays. Isle of Jura is another one I like to get. It's harder to get them over here. We've got about 100 mile, 140 mile round trip to do to find a decent malt whisky. Although I can get the Glenlivet in my local supermarket here on occasion, and that keeps me going until I make the longer trip to get the better stuff. My favourite beer before leaving Scotland was Harveston's Bitter and Twisted, because that's what the local pubs in Kinross had when I was living there, and I could always get that in pubs in Edinburgh as well. It was either that or Timothy Taylor's Landlord, which became a favourite when I was living in England. So I like bitters basically, and them and single malt whiskies I'm still living with all these years on. John, who asked the question, was one of the first people I ever went drinking with way back when in discos in the Dorai Inn back in, oh god, it'd be 74, I think maybe the first one we went to, late 74, early 75, probably around about then. So that's a wheen of years ago. I was just having a look at my website again, see if there's anything else I haven't actually talked about yet. My website had a nice big overhaul last year, and I've got it just about the way I like it. It's one of the things I do when I'm not writing is play around with the website and try and get it to look nice. And it's gone through a lot of varying excuse me. It's gone through a lot of varying changes over the years, but I've got it now into a state that it's easy to change and it looks the way I like it. And I've just noticed I was talking about ebooks earlier. If anybody wants a cheap way into my writing, I've got a page on my website of 99-cent ebooks, and there's a load of stuff there which are only 99 cents each, which is 70p. So if you're looking for a 70p entry to my writing, that's the place to go and get it. And if you're even cheaper than that, if you sign up to my newsletter, there's a link on the webpage, you get links to some free stuff. I've got half a dozen free ebooks that you can pick up that I send you. Once you sign up to my newsletter, I send you an email with links to them. And if anybody's on Smashwords, there's more free stuff there. And there's a link on the website to free short stories to read as well. So I give away things free just to get people interested, mainly older stories and things that have been published before and now I've got the rights back to. So there's a lot of free stuff lying around and cheap stuff lying around if you're interested in getting into it. And there's a link on the website which links through to the purely Scottish stuff if anybody's interested in just that, or just the purely Newfoundland stuff if anybody's interested in just that. Links to the Sherlock Holmes stuff, the Derek Highlands Bin Nick stuff, and etc. etc. They've all got separate pages on my website. So if you're interested, that's the place to go. There's still new people joining in now, and I'm just about to log off, so I'm sorry about that. You've missed me. I've been going for nearly an hour now, and my voice is getting a bit dry. And I think I'll be giving up soon, in about 2 or 3 minutes' time. So if any last questions from anybody, now's the time to get one in. Otherwise, I'll be signing off. You can probably see from my webcam here that it's just starting to get dark outside, and it's getting a bit cold sitting here as well. I'm in the kitchen at the moment and I haven't got the heating on. Cold and damp today out there, and we had snow earlier on in the week. Some more coming later on in the week as well. Winter's just about here, and as you can see, I've got a hoodie on. Need to keep warm in this weather. Time for the long johns next week probably. We've got thermal underwear and 2 pairs of socks and 3 jumpers and the heating on. So that's how we live over here. I don't see any more questions, and I'm coming up for the full hour now, so I'll just say thank you to everybody for having me on. Thanks to North Ayrshire Libraries for having me. Thanks to everybody for listening, and I hope I passed the audition. Goodbye.